Welcome to Salem, the podcast.
We are your hosts and favorite Salem tour guides.
My name is Sarah Black.
And I'm Jeffrey Lilly.
Today, we're going to be taking you on a little field trip to Danvers, Massachusetts.
Field trip time!
Not literally, because, this equipment doesn't travel
We
best.
could. We could, just carry the whole table and get, a power generator.
Go from place to place.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure the Danvers people would love that.
I don't know. They've probably seen weirder, more weird, strange. It's Danvers.
Mm-hmm.
Kid. Danvers.
So after deciding we were going to pursue Rebecca Nurse as a topic, we wanted to bring that into the modern day. So we decided to make a trip to the Rebecca Nurse homestead. But as we'll find out in a minute here, Danvers has so many other locations tied to the Salem Witch Trials, aside from having the only standing home that belonged to a victim. So we hit the Danvers Witch Trials Memorial. Yes, they have their own memorial. And we also visited the Parris parsonage where it all began.
But before we jump into all that, quick tour time stuff.
Tour time.
We'll get to a cool sound bit one day. Don't worry.
Or I can just make it up every time.
Every time. Didn't we say that last time?
Yes, we did.
Yay, tour time. They're probably sitting here listening like, oh my God, guys.
Sing tour time for me.
Tour time. That was so bad. Can you cut that?
No.
Tour time.
Ooh,
Tour
see?
time.
That's cool.
Do you like a little da 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 da? Okay, I'm going to keep sorry. I apologize to everyone listening.
So what happened on your tours this weekend?
So I had, this was a week ago, a little over week and a half, a week ago. Anyway, recently on tour, I had some listeners.
Cool.
Yes. So they booked. So when we get a booking on tour, in my how did you hear about us section, I have also local store, local hotel.
Right, like Google, whatever,
right,
TripAdvisor.
Friend, enemy.
Do you really have enemy on there?
Yes.
Amazing. Amazing.
It not many people use the enemy, but it's been used a couple times.
I like that.
But I also now have Salem the podcast. And so this person selected Salem the podcast. I also have a section of, is this some sort of a celebration, a thing?
Right. Where they can add a little note.
Yeah, birthday party, bachelorette party, just in family reunion, whatever. And I saw this come in and I kind of discounted it as oh, haha. But then I had them on tour and it turns out they weren't really lying.
Oh my God. What?
Traveled from New Zealand for this tour.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So originally when I first saw it, I was like, NZ. I was like, that's New Zealand. And I was like, that can't possibly mean New Zealand. Maybe it's did they misspell AZ, Arizona, Nebraska? And I was like, they couldn't have possibly.
So tell me, you met them and...
Yeah, they did for the most part. So Nikki, and I'm sorry, I can't remember their partner's name. I feel so bad. They said it and it's gone from my head because it's a sieve. So
Jeffrey,
to you both,
they're gonna stop listening.
I
now.
know. I'm sorry, and it's not him. It was her who was the propagator of this narrative. So he's from New Zealand. They were in New Zealand. They drove up from Pennsylvania. So they have traveled an extensive amount of time to be here.
Uh-huh.
And she knew that they were coming to visit Salem, so she had Googled Salem, had searched Salem, had found my tour, and was like, this is cool, this seems interesting, small business, not one of the big corporate things. She was like, that's what I want to do. And then through that had found the podcast, and then had marathon the entire podcast.
Ooh.
Had made her boyfriend marathon the entire podcast. So they had in the drive up and everything else. So they were at this point avid listeners.
Oh my God.
Of the podcast. And
that's amazing.
So it was really cool. And because I didn't believe that, traveled from New Zealand. So I'm fairly certain they are, by any leaps and measures, our most distant listeners.
I think we got a couple people in Australia too. I think we're hitting some good spots over in New Zealand and Australia, that area. Yeah. So
there we go.
Thank you.
Yes. And they were very excited and loved it all and loved the podcast, and we're very excited.
That's very cool.
Yes. So shout out to them, and just want to let you know that they are hearing your voice all over the world.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple listeners on tour over the past week or so. I had one guy, though, at the end of it, when we were saying our goodbyes and chit-chatting, he says, "Oh my gosh," because I saved the podcast thing for the end. He's
Right.
like, "I thought I recognized your voice." A lot of people, they have booked the tour and maybe have looked up on Spotify, Apple, whatever, Salem in the podcast section. It just pops up and they don't put the two and two together. They're like, "Oh my God, you're Sarah." You're
the Sarah.
No, don't say that. But basically, yeah, it's a fun connection to watch. Now I would like to just point out that multiple people have like not made the connection between our tours and the podcast, like whether or not it's them having difficulty finding us or like just not having a desire to like, take the tours. We had gotten a negative review pretty soon after we started the podcast, a 1 star, which I thought was a little excessive. Who knows? Could it have been another tour guide in town or
Jealous
owner?
rivalry.
I mean, I don't think we've talked tour wars very much on this podcast, but based on the amount that they had referenced touring in general, it seemed a little suspicious. But in that review, it complains about how this is just an advertisement for our tours and how it's obviously not. If there are multiple people that still don't know how to even book through us. Like,
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And it's sort of like one of these things, like if I wanted advertising, like there are cheaper ways.
I was going to say, this also takes so much time and energy.
This is like a whole second job. And, cool. But like I can just pump ad revenue into Google and Instagram, print up flyers, stuff like that. And like, again, genuinely love meeting listeners on the tour, people who love Salem and have that passion and are excited. You guys are awesome. But if that review was like, this is the point of this, like,
Sorry. We just didn't know when to shut up and wanted to start recording it. Like, that's
right?
all.
Yeah.
So if we get a couple listeners on tour in the process,
Cool.
heck yeah. I love to meet people that love Salem. But at the same time, like you said, it wasn't the purpose behind this.
No.
Ooh, one last little quick tidbit thing, not tour related, but you're just going to think this is a cool piece of information. I think I've been sitting on this for like 2 months.
Couldn't have been comfortable.
Very funny. But I didn't know when to like bring it up or to put it in. And I wanted it to be related to what we're talking about, but I'm just going to give it to you anyways. Stumbled onto some information from my Salem High School comrades, not currently in Salem High School, but used to go to Salem High School. They used to have wharfs, as you know how different elementary schools, middle schools, I think it was more like an elementary school thing. You're sectioned into different classes, right?
Oh, yeah. Like I don't know. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, you'd have and that's your group, right? That
Yeah.
you're going to go, say it's middle school. I think it was middle school we were talking about. And they've got 3 different sections in the school, and those are the kids that you're going to be in the same classes with for the next 3 years or so.
Right.
Salem separates theirs into wharves.
So what do we have?
So you've got a Derby wharf, you've got the Crown and Shield wharf, and I can't remember what the other wharf was.
Pickering?
Oh yeah, Pickering. Duh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
there
know.
we go.
Okay.
No, you're right. It's either 3 or 4. But like, how cool.
That's
and
pretty neat.
Funny.
I bet they'd.
And then of course, like my friends, Sarah and Nate, they're a couple years apart. So they were kind of arguing about which wharf was like what. Like, oh no, the Crown and Shields were like the preppy people. And oh no, the Derby people in my class were, it was so funny.
That's amazing.
It was great.
And Salem.
Right? And something that people are so interested in, consume oodles and oodles of information on. This was just their
middle school. Yeah.
Their normal upbringing.
It's almost like Hogwarts houses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's, perfect comparison.
But on to Danvers.
Speaking of school and field trips.
Yeah, our school field, our podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, field trip to Danvers.
Excursion.
Yeah. So I didn't I know about Danvers, I know like where it is, and I was like, but I need a little bit of historical context. So I did a quick Google to school myself up on a little history of Danvers. So I guess this was originally sort of quote unquote founded or used in 1630, and this is sort of the same as Conant using Salem in prior to 1626, right? So I guess they first utilized a road that had already been there that was in use by the indigenous people. So I guess we should probably take a quick opportunity to recognize that not only Salem as we sit, but Salem Village, or now modern day Danvers, was of course historically and still continues to be indigenous land, and that would be the Namkeg people in the Massachusetts tribe. Following that, 1636, so 10 years after Salem is founded, Salem Village is founded. And this is just sort of like an extension of Salem. It's like, okay, now we're going to be utilizing this land as well.
Right. And remember, Salem, what would have been considered Salem town, what we are in right now, what you come to visit and you know as quote unquote Salem in modern day, that was an early port city. But they needed a bit more land and they needed to spread out a bit. A lot of the folks that are going to go to the west and to the northwest and create what is today Danvers, or back then was Salem Village, these are going to be more yeoman farmer types.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they'll have a lot more land to work with. And that's really going to be the demographic makeup of these people. Less population,
more land.
More
and
land.
It's just, that's farming.
More agriculturally based.
Yeah. Because like, okay, cool. If we're shipping into the shipping maritime fishing, you need a small house and a big boat.
Right.
Here, you need a small house and a big plot of land to get that crop, that agriculture, whether that's logging, hunting, fur trade, crops, corn, whatever have you. So they need those several 100-acre plots. And this is why we expand slightly farther westward.
And that is what, maybe a 10, 15-minute drive for us.
No traffic, yeah.
No traffic. But back then, these folks that are moving to the outskirts, they still have to make that trek into Salem town to go to church for a good portion of its early years.
Yeah,
so.
and also conscription might be the wrong word, but service in the militia and whatnot is still based in Salem town. So when you have like watch and city guard and things along those lines, so you're just like, wow, I got to travel all this way for these people for this thing when you're trying to live your own life, and they don't like grow apart. That's not really.
No, I think there's some.
I think, and grow apart might actually be the best phrase, when you have the farmers doing their farmer thing and the fishermen doing their fisherman thing, and when you have these wharfs and you're largely or more largely connected to ports and to shipping and to Boston, and then the people out farms, there's a small resentment there, and that's why they grow a little more independent. And it's in 1672 that they are finally allowed to establish their own church. They've been trying to push for this for a long time. And for a while, the crown sort of says no, and the king denies them, and these sorts of things. But 1672, they are now allowed their own place of worship. But it's at this point that they try and find a minister who aligns with their narrative. So their church ideals are more conservative than the church ideals in Salem town, which is one thing that's going to propagate the narrative of the Salem Witch Trials. And they strike out a few times. We have James Bailey from 1672 to 1679, George Burroughs from 1680 to 1683.
If that name sounds familiar, that would be the George Burroughs that is executed in August of 1692. He was a practicing minister over in Salem Village 10 years prior.
Which is one of the things that leads to his accusations and whatnot. And don't worry,
I think we'll we'll do a whole episode on him.
Yeah. Then following him is Deodat Lawson from 1684 to 1688.
You'll also see his name quite a bit in the witch trials. He did a lot of the transcriptions in the courtroom, and also I believe he gave testimony against several people as well.
And then following him is the infamous Reverend Parris. Now, Reverend Parris is the first ordained minister. So these other people had been practicing ministers, but they hadn't gotten their full ministership yet. So that means that they could not baptize and they could not offer communion. So for that first, what do we have, 72 to 88, the people in Salem Village, while they can go to church and listen and practice and hear these sermons, for those more significant checks in the box within their religious ideas, they still had to come to Salem Village. They still had to come to Salem Town. It's with Reverend Parris that they can now focus themselves in their own ministry, and they don't have to go anywhere else, which is because they'd been looking for that more conservative ideological minister. But then that has a twofold result, meaning they no longer have to go to the Salem Town Church. So that means they're just doubling down on their own narrative, even with this minister who can then provide them the services they need.
And with it coming several decades later, the Salem Village Church, you can see where some of that resentment might also start to brew as well, because they're just now finding their footing. They don't have nearly the amount of revenue coming into the town. So they're overall struggling just a bit more compared to Salem Town. And I don't think we mentioned this in our previous episodes, but another tension that will start is this idea of church membership. So you to be, and I know we touched on this in the Rebecca Nurse episode, she was a fully covenant member of the church. She had done all the requirements, the necessary requirements, and she was approved by the church, by the minister, to be a fully covenant member. She's going to heaven. She's done all the things. It took a lot of time and a lot of dedication to achieve that status. But there was some discrepancies between Salem Village and Salem Town Church. So Salem Town Church, basically, they said that if you were a member of the Salem Town Church, you were also a full member of the Salem Village Church. So for people like Rebecca Nurse, who is living in Salem Village, she's reaping all the benefits of the Salem Village Church, even though she was originally a member of the Salem Town Church, which sounds so like ridiculous and political. But in reality, when this is your life, like this is what they are living their day to day by, this religious practice, this was a big deal. And the politics of church is just like the politics you see around us in modern day. It was extreme.
So I think the best way that helped me understand this, and I think I heard this maybe from Marilyn Roach, or I can't remember specifically, but they described the church as not a building, right? So when we say church, we think this is it, but the church to them is the population, the members. So the members make up that idea of the church.
It's like a living entity. It's not the building itself.
It's not like, the church. You're like, okay, the church isn't the physical thing. The church is the people who make up the greater body. So when we talk about,
it's like that collective consciousness.
Yeah. So when we talk about, it's a slight against the church or against this, it's not just like that. It's the full population. But Reverend Parris is living in Salem Village, as in the home of the building that is slated for the minister.
They are approved for their own church in 1672. In 1681, they will construct a home for their minister. So this was very common back then. People would pool their money and kind of like taxes, and they would build a home for their preacher.
So it's provided by the town.
The first person to live in there was
Reverend Burroughs,
who we just mentioned, then followed by Deodat Lawson, and then Reverend Parris. So Reverend Samuel Parris, what it's named for in modern day, the Parris Parsonage.
which is the first stop on our field trip.
So you had been, right?
I had been, yes.
Do you remember when?
Maybe a year and a half ago.
Just went out on your own?
So I made and I don't know why I didn't do it was winter. Maybe that might be why. When I started my own tour company, I realized there was like a few things missing from like my narrative, right? Like, so I constantly, you always mention the Parris parsonage, right? Because like, this is where it happened. These are where the girls were afflicted. This is where the whole thing sort of starts. And for something that I had been talking about like every day, I was like, I need to go and see this place. So it was winter. I think there was even snow on the ground.
Very coincidental that you decide to go during winter when it would have been
Yeah,
that type
yeah.
of, it would have been then that the girls start having their fits,
Mm-hmm.
late January. So very similar weather atmosphere.
Yeah. And so it's just a foundation at this point. So it's not the building. There's no structure still there, but it's an archaeological site and a historic site.
And it's very unassuming. Like, you have to know where to look. There's a little plaque on the side of the road.
Yep.
You kind of just peel off to the side, and then you walk through two modern homes.
Between.
Sorry. You, I'm going to leave that in. Not through their homes. You've got two homes that the city has a little slice of property between. So you walk down that path and you come upon the site of these two old stone foundations.
It's fenced off. There are 1, 2, 3 different sort of plaques or signs there. You can read it as an archaeological historic site. There's some description of what the house once looked like, and the addition to the house and these sorts of things, and then how it was excavated and sort of, I don't want to say rediscovered, but recognized as a historic site by
Richard Trask, actually.
Yeah.
So this was interesting. The excavation work started in the early 1970s. And if you are a big fan of the witch trials, you've read any major books, any modern books on the topic, his name has probably popped up before. He is the town archivist of Danvers. And he was just a student. A college student when he decided to pursue this project. He approached the two owners of the property and said, I think this is where the Parris household stood. Can we do some archaeological work on it? And they found it. So they uncovered the two foundations, and the city purchased the land, and it will forever remain as it is. It's amazing to think that this location had sat uncovered for so long. And you said it was your second time going. I had never gone. And for me, this was such a powerful moment as someone who studied the trials on and off for so many years at this point. I don't know why. It's a 12-minute drive from my house.
Yeah.
Like, it's so close. But it took starting this podcast and starting this amount of research, getting really back into the nitty gritty to want to connect and go out and see these sites and expand my knowledge and expand my own understanding and narrative. And it was just really heavy being able to be in the spot where it all began. And I've played these scenes over in my head so many times at this point. I've told these stories, I've described them, I've watched people absorb this information, but I haven't been there. And to be there in that spot, it was just, whew.
So what I think is really strange about it, and I think I mentioned this while we were there, or maybe I haven't. So I'm from here, Massachusetts, and we actually recently went to my house where I grew up and took a quick little walk in the woods, and I showed you some of the old foundations that are out there. Mm-hmm. And those are scattered around. I could have brought you to 8 or 9 others that are very similar. And I spent my childhood growing up and playing in these woods and in these places and in these old foundations and places. And I have looked at my town history, and there's no record of where these places are. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
And so, again, I haven't done like a significant amount of archaeological research or evidence at all, just like a casual look. But I'm fairly convinced that they're from the 1700s. I know there was a big fire in Groton at one point. I know a lot of the colonial houses were destroyed by the indigenous people in King Philip's War. And so it sort of stands to reason that if not in that time around there, that people lived there. And so all these places just littered around New England. And this place is just like all the others. And it is their lives were so common to them in these places that we've seen a dozen times before, and as similar as it was to all these places that I'd been before, it was also so remarkably different just because of that
story.
That story.
That moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That moment we could say the beginning fits, lasts a few months. I mean, it just, over the course of 13 months, what did those people hear? What did those walls see? Like
before that. Because, this is where Reverend Parris is. And so, you could make the strong argument that he is the cause of a significant amount of this. And it's him living in that place. And like, I'd stood there and, what these girls were going through, some of the things that we've heard that they did, sort of the self-harm, and in terms of the running into walls, things like that, or, the attacks that they had, or how Parris would practice his sermons. Was that sitting at a table? Was it pacing around a room? Was it preaching from the Bible as these girls knelt there or sat there and not necessarily forced to listen, but
it's a small house. You're going to hear it no matter what.
And that's where Tituba picks up the significant amount of her understanding of the devil, which is why she's able to paint the picture for them that she was in these small, what was it, maybe 15 by 15, and they just, through osmosis, gain that knowledge, and then through all these other, small little things that are going on in the community, that's where it all started.
So if you are looking to do a little trek through Danvers, might we suggest starting here? It's located at 67 Center Street, and it is a free, open to the public piece of property owned by the town of Danvers. We ask that if you do make the visit, please be respectful. It's small, it's quaint, it's a heavy piece of history.
Can I make a small suggestion?
Yeah.
Park at the memorial and walk over.
Good call.
Yeah.
There's no parking.
I had to sort of jump in off the side of the road parking, which I don't know if I shouldn't have done.
Yeah, no, I don't think you should have done that.
But park at our next stop, which we're going to talk about here, at the memorial, and then it couldn't have been more than a
3-minute drive.
I was going to say a 5-minute walk.
Oh yeah, it'd be a 5-minute walk easily.
Yeah, because I had to turn around, so we pulled a zigzag, and then yeah.
So the Danvers Witch Trials Memorial was dedicated on May 9th, 1992. So our memorial, which I think most people are familiar with already, right next to the Old Burying Point Charter Street Cemetery, that was dedicated on August 5th, 1992. So this one went in first, although I am sorry to say...
I was just counting the months, 3 months.
Oh, I'm sorry to say neither of us had ever visited.
Nope. So even when I went to the Parris Parsonage, I don't know.
We're just terrible tour guides.
I would argue, and for other tour guides who are listening, have you been? If other tour guides in Salem are listening, let us know, reach out, and then then we know that you're listening. No,
and then we look real bad.
I would argue that the majority have not.
Okay.
I would make that argument, that the majority of tour guides in Salem have not taken the trip over to Danvers.
Okay.
I will shame us a little bit.
I feel slightly ashamed.
Yeah.
So I will admit it, but it was an interesting experience. It's a totally different than ours. So real quick, the one that you see when you come to Salem town, our modern day Salem that's right next to the Pickman House, right next to the old burying point. You've got those 20 benches along, 10 on each side, and each one has like a name, date of execution, method of execution, and then you have the trees and the little rectangular greenery space in the middle. And it's kind of this wraparound path that you go through. This one, though, gave me like Vietnam memorial vibes with the tall plaques.
Okay.
You know,
And
like
the names listed on that? Sure.
yeah, that
Sure.
was kind of the visual that it conjured in my head.
It's also kind of alone, right? Like Charter Street there's always people. It's next to the burying point. There's like restaurants around. It's downtown. There's other buildings around. So it's a very busy location, and not just in terms of people, but it's next to the PEM. There's cars driving by, right? So there's always something sort of going on.
Very bustling.
Yeah.
Sees a lot of traffic.
This was very alone. So it sort of stood alone. And I'm not trying to. So even when we were there, I sort of felt alone, right? Like,
you said alone like 7.
I know, but I can't come up with a better way. It's almost as though where we were was forgotten, where we were was not necessarily neglected, which then sort of made me think of all the people who it represented, who had been forgotten, alone, and neglected by the community.
I wouldn't say that it was alone, but it was in a more secluded area.
Yeah.
Like, of course, Danvers doesn't have this bustling tourist culture. If anything, I felt like what we were experiencing, nowhere near what they saw terrain-wise in 1692, but it felt closer to what they were seeing. So like being in Danvers, we were kind of in, I don't know, like a suburban area. The houses were pretty spread out. You didn't hear the bustling of
Salem.
You didn't see a bunch of people walking around. It felt like you were back in time for just a quick moment. That's how I felt personally. And it was off to the side, somewhat in a secluded area. It looked like there was like a park or some type of recreation center behind it. And as you're coming up to it, you know, it's right on the side of the road, so you can see it as you're driving by. It has 5 tall granite panels, and on those panels, there are lists of everyone who died, basically in chronological order. And one thing I really appreciate about this memorial is it doesn't just focus on the people that were executed and Giles Corey, who was tortured to death, but it also talks about the people that died in jail. And
so it includes those 5 others, which
right.
the Proctor's Ledge Memorial does, but the one that we're most familiar with doesn't. So it was nice to see their names. But each panel, it sort of breaks it down by group.
I think it's by
It's in chronological order, yeah.
Each person next to their name, it also includes where they're from.
Yes.
Which I also very much appreciated, because so many people think this is secluded to Salem.
Right, and it's not.
And it makes the distinction between Salem Town, Salem Village, so you see where all these folks have come from. And then on the furthest most panels, the outside panels, there are several quotes from the original documents from these victims, which reminded me of the Holocaust Memorial over in Boston.
Okay.
As you walk through, you'll see quotes.
You see
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It was well done.
Yeah, and that's not even.
That's not even like the main.
Yeah, and then so that's in, I guess, in the back.
Yeah.
Preceding that in the front, is a large pedestal. Granite block.
A granite block that it looks like a tomb, but it also, I think.
Do you think? I don't know.
Maybe is it meant to be a tomb?
Is it
in a way?
As one of those old chest tombs that we see?
Yeah, it looks similar to an old chest tomb.
Could be. I'm not sure. On top of that is a book, and It's unfolding, and it just reads the Book of Life. Flanked on either side of that are shackles, and then the stone reads,
"In memory of those innocents who died during the Salem Village witchcraft hysteria of 1692. So I'd say overall,
it's so different
it's so different.
than the one that we're used to standing in every day.
Oh, and at the top of the center panel, above it, above all of it, the highest part of the memorial is an engraving of a Puritan minister kind of overseeing everything. So I think it speaks to just like the power structure. I don't know.
I don't love it, but
are we about to give our personal opinions on it?
Of the preacher?
To me, it felt the chains, the book, the preacher, it all felt like a bit too much, in my opinion. I don't know if that's the best word. It just
No, I feel that. It was sort of almost as though they were trying to go. They wanted to include many important things, and they couldn't figure out what to cut. And they're like, I appreciate the shackles, especially because like the weight, sometimes literal physical weight of what those meant, and the people who were held in jail, and they were held, and they were usually shackled as they were brought to Proctor's Ledge. The book, the readings, it comes from the Bible.
I really think that was meant to be like a chest tomb.
Okay.
Because if you think those people, they're never given a burial. This is like
right
the spot, and like that's why the Book of Life is open.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting.
But we should also mention that the location is important as well.
This was the coolest part,
yeah,
in my opinion.
So it is built, or it was built, or it is standing across the street from where the meeting house once stood.
So that would be the meeting house in which they have the initial questioning, where Tituba, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne are brought, where the chaos of the courtroom erupts. The girls are having their fits in front of the entire community. This is also where Rebecca Nurse would have been brought for her initial questioning. So not where the trials themselves took place. Remember, that courthouse was right in downtown Salem, or what is now downtown Salem, what was Salem Town back then. Here we have the Salem Village Meeting House, where Reverend Parris is doing his preaching, and also where these initial questionings would have taken place. It was at that moment when you pointed out the sign that said this is where the old meeting house used to stand, I realized we were going in order.
Yeah.
Like we went from where it started to where it went next, to the meeting house, to the questioning, to the community outbreak, I guess you could say, where Tituba tells her tale. It was pretty crazy.
And then from there, our next stop on our field trip,
the Rebecca Nurse Homestead.
And so one of the cool things, we'll get into everything that we saw there, but one of the cool things that was there was the replica of the meeting house.
Which I don't think you and neither of us knew was going to be there. That was kind of a surprise.
I think I knew, like, oh, it's a replica of the meeting house, but having started at the Parris Parsonage and then going to the location of where the meeting house was, and just having you there, and we could like sort of talk about what was going on, and then moving to that location was like, I hate to use the word cool.
It was full circle.
It was cool. You're like, man, this is like.
It felt like you were being transported back.
Yeah.
But it was weird. It was eerie, walking into that space. And actually, a funny little interjection. I wish we would have known what their event scheduling was. We weren't able to get into the meeting house right away because they were having an event, and they said something about a church service. So my first thought was like, excuse me, I would not want to go to a church service in like in a building that is a replica based on where these people were first like
Right. Like, what are you doing?
persecuted.
Wait, is it like a party? Is it a thing? And we didn't know, which, hey, and lesson learned. Always, I don't know. I don't know what the lesson here is.
Plan ahead.
Sure. But we didn't know that this was good.
We walk in, and there's a guy
Dressed like a
Puritan minister, like sitting where the Puritan minister would have sat, and come to find out he had done a whole Puritan sermon.
taken from Reverend Parris's notes.
Yup.
And I guess it was just a thing that they had put on. That they do sometimes these historical. So it wasn't an actual church service. It was
as if you were going to church back in 1692.
Yeah. So people had, and I guess it had been on their website, and they had promoted it, and we had just missed it.
But was kind of crazy and cool nonetheless.
Yeah. But that building was the last one we went into, and it was neat.
Yes, put up in 1984, so not too old, for PBS's 3-part documentary series, 3 Sovereigns for Sarah.
If you haven't checked that out, highly recommended. Go.
Jeff hasn't even checked it out. You got to tell our listeners to watch it, and you haven't even watched it.
Everyone who I've known has said go watch it,
It's
it's just
so good.
one of these things that just is not.
We'll watch it together.
We can't do everything. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
But when you watch that movie, when you watch that series, the meeting house that they have all the initial questioning in, that was the one that was built on the Rebecca Nurse homestead, which we got to go into. So kind of cool.
I guess the person who works for Essex Heritage was there, and she was telling us that people continue to use this. I mean, they'd used it that day, but she was telling us that oftentimes, like if you've seen some sort of reenactment, some sort of movie, some sort of documentary that involves Puritans and meeting houses, it's likely that spot. I guess they can rent it out. They've done some weddings there.
Yeah.
Things like that.
As soon as she said rent it out, Jeffrey's ears perked up. He's like, ooh, what are we going to do here?
We could record a podcast episode in there.
I would like to see a full-blown like reenactment in there. I'm sure they do that from time to time.
Yeah.
But yes, we could record.
I don't know if Cry Innocent works from the town hall here in Salem. That would be cool.
That would be very cool.
Yeah.
Real quick plug on that woman who took the time to chat with us. That was Catherine Rakowski. And I had actually listened to her talk before we went to the homestead. She was on a podcast called Someone Lived Here. So if you are looking for some more resources after this episode, go check that out. The host, Kendra Gaylord, goes to different locations throughout the country and just sits down with curators, exhibit specialists, that kind of thing, and talks about the individual who lived in that space. So she actually recorded the episode in the space. Hopefully, maybe one day we can do that in the future, but it's a great in-depth dive into the Rebecca Nurse homestead.
Very neat. Speaking of the homestead, that's why we went. That's why we were there. We went to go visit the only standing structure that one of the innocent victims from the Salem Witch Trials lived in. And I know so many of you come to Salem and you get your Instagram picture from the witch house, or you take a tour of the witch house, or, that's a big deal. And it is an incredibly important historical structure. It's a very cool. We went and took a tour. We did a whole episode on the witch house. But no witches lived in the witch house.
No witches lived at the Rebecca Nurse homestead either.
Very good.
Remember that, people.
Yes.
No witches.
Innocent victims.
But it was extremely significant. And I will say, I know that the home itself has gone through several renovations, and Rebecca Nurse and her family had only moved on to it, in the 1670s? Mm-hmm. So it's not like she raised all her children there.
Born and raised. She was born in England. But it wasn't like they spent their entire lives here. But there was a portion.
Yes.
And that's where she was.
When they executed her, I think that was the heaviest moment for me, was standing in the room where they very well believe that they believe that she might have been in when they came to arrest her, because she was
poorly,
of course, 71,
yeah,
quite frail, possibly sickly at this moment. She's probably in bed in the main room by the fireplace, and to stand in that spot while the tour guide was talking about what she would have said when they came to get her. It was just a very powerful moment, looking out the window at the farm.
So that's what I was doing when I was sitting on the stoop, just looking outside.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
When I saw you, and what I was thinking of was what her children would have felt, because they would have watched her be carried away and they would have been left there. What do you do?
So, and this is why I did that. None of the furniture or what, and you could have stood and looked at the room, but the room is going to look different, right? The room is going to change, and the windows and whatnot. But when I was like, the amount of the people who have literally walked where I was sitting, because you can't, and you don't know where in the room they would have stood. You don't know where in the room they would have walked through, but they had to get in the house. So likely where I was sitting and looking out into those fields was where the nurse children came to play. They came to hang out, but to get in and out of the house, they came in with the arrest warrant through there and took her out through there. And that's just sort of what was going on through my head when I was sitting there.
Like I said, we imagine these scenes over and over again. We think about these names constantly. We tell these stories constantly. I've dreamed about the Salem Witch Trials multiple times at this point.
Only in October.
Really?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you don't dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, never mind. You're weird.
Yeah.
But to be in the location, and I know we've touched on this in previous episodes, this idea of place, being in that location where it all went down, where it happened, there's a heaviness and energy, whatever you want to call it, whether it's the weight that comes from the centuries of people putting that energy into it, like Mike brought up in one of our recent episodes about the Salem Witch Trials Memorial, or it's just our own understanding coming to that space with the knowledge that we do, knowing these stories, knowing the heartbreak, and then being there. It was a lot.
But it was also really kind of neat to sort of just, if nothing else, you sort of look around, and it helps you when we talk about these locations. So the life they led, and what they did, the churning the butter, the fixing fishing nets, their prayers, their daily services, the animals in the barns, and these sorts of things. It's sometimes difficult, and I try and paint a picture for the people on tour. These rooms were small. These houses were small. They're not living in like these great grand, you think, oh, they had horses in the barn, and you think 21st century, what a barn looked like, with 15 paddocks and all these horses, and they're modern. Like, and
you can go to Home Depot if something breaks.
Yeah. Like, you have lights, you have electricity, right? Your hay bales, and they're like, that's not what was real. And I try and erase sort of a modern narrative from the story, but to be able to stand there and be like, God, this is really what it was like.
I had some guy on tour. He was somewhat giving me a hard time pretty much throughout the entirety of it, which happens depending on the person. But I think he was very skeptical of the whole thing. I don't know what knowledge he came to Salem with, whether he thought, the whole thing was a conspiracy, or some people think that, everyone was just going nuts on ergot poisoning, whatever the case may be. He's like, why didn't people just leave? Like, why wouldn't you just get up and go? Like, what do you mean? Go where?
But like that's people say the same thing today. You're like, what are you going to do? Right? Like, just leave. You're like, okay, cool. I can just leave my job.
Let me just uproot my whole entire life, family, everything.
I can sell my house. I can sell my car. I can take my kids. I can just leave. You can't just do that. If that was so easy, then we'd
do it all the time.
Yeah. Like, can you afford that? Can you afford to leave? What's your car payment? What's your house? What's your mortgage? What's the bank? You're going to close a deal. I know the housing market today is pretty good, but like, I would have to move, like hire movers,
you can't do that back then.
Yeah.
You don't get to hire anyone. Yeah. Like, for these people to escape, you're leaving everything that you have built. up until that point, possibly never to return.
And where would you
frontier territory, where are you going to go?
Back to England. You can't go, maybe, what is South? You get you can't go, I mean, I guess you could go north, but the French are up there and they're Catholics. You don't want to deal with them.
And like they brought George Burroughs all the way down from Maine. Like if you wanted to be safe, you had to make it all the way down to New York.
Which someone did, Philip English, but
he was rich as hell.
The wealthiest person in Salem. So yeah, you could just leave if you had the money.
Which, please. I mean...
Make of that modern argument what you will.
But yeah, I was like, it's not easy. Not in the slightest. Yeah. And if you think moving your life today would be difficult, just imagine what it was like. It wasn't a free for all. I think that's what he thought it was. It was just a free for all. You can just, I don't like it here. I'm going to go an hour away and set up shop somewhere else.
Her and Francis are going to get their 8 kids, dozen grandkids, and just...
And then you got to think about how many of these people that were targeted were elderly.
Yeah. She was bedridden. She can't cool. Let's just move grandma no, please.
And also, let's not say, why aren't people leaving? Let's talk about why they would have to leave in the first place and address the actual issue.
If there's a reason you need to flee from your home, the problem isn't fleeing. The problem is why you have to flee.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Just wanted to.
No. Yeah. So from the homestead, we took a short walk, sort of skirted the edge of a wood, down across a field, to another rather important location.
The Nurse and Putnam Family Burial Ground, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but...
It is weird.
It is weird, but remember, we mentioned in our most recent Rebecca Nurse episode that there were Putnams in her family by marriage,
yes.
And it'll just populate even more after the trials. So Putnam becomes a very big part of their family name, but it is not obviously, you got Putnams on both sides. You got accusers and accused.
So the legend goes that after or on the evening of July 19th, 1692, a member of the Nurse family sails up the North River and recovers Rebecca Nurse's body. So remember, these people were considered witches, agents of the devil. They were not buried. They were not given burial practices and laid in the ground. They were likely just discarded or put in a shallow grave. So that night, they recover her body and bring it back down the river to the Rebecca Nurse homestead, where we went to see.
Now it is said that her husband, Francis, and one of her sons requested to be buried alongside her, and that's where they're at. So it's believed that this is where she is located. Also, in this burial ground is a stone for George Jacobs. So he was executed also in his 70s. He was executed in August of 1692, and when they were doing some archaeological work at Proctor's Ledge, they discovered a set of remains, which they believed to be George Jacobs, because he had the bones showed signs of osteoporosis, and he walked with 2 canes. He was kind of known to be a bit frail in the limbs. So his body was removed from the Proctor's Ledge area and placed at the Rebecca Nurse homestead. So you've got those 2 victims buried in that space. Significant because that's really the only 2 that we know of. Everyone else's bodies have just been lost to time. There's a possibility that some families did go back and retrieve.
I believe also some people speculate that John Proctor's
I hope so. I do hope so.
Remains were taken, and excuse me because I haven't schooled myself up on this, but were taken to somewhere and buried there. But unfortunately, that site was then constructed over, and part of my memory is telling me that it's maybe a road or a highway.
Okay.
I I cannot remember the specifics on that.
That makes sense.
But
he's a highly respected man in town.
So I'll try and look into that and get back to you. But that's few and far between. And again, these places, while it is likely or probable or speculative, it's not 100% known. It's not like a guarantee. As I said, legend, right? This is probably what happened, and we tend to believe that. But in contrast to that, I can walk a mile down the street and walk directly up to and in front of Magistrate Hathorn's grave with a headstone. It's right there. I know where he is. That's not up to question. That's not a possibility. That's not a legend. He's right there. The anger. But that's
what happens when you die in power.
The history.
That memorial to her was put up in 1885. So I think that speaks to the just all around consciousness of the property owners and of the nurse family. They're talking about this still in the 19th century. This is long before Witch City,
Yeah, I get asked a lot, has this always been historically prevalent? And I sort of say, depends on the time. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. In the late 1800s, it was. We see the Daniel Owen Company witch spoon. We see the Rebecca Nurse Monument. We see Upham.
Charles Upham.
He publishes his historical account of the Salem Witch Trials in 1867. So we can see that the late 1800s, there is a prevalence, which is probably tied to spiritualism.
I was going to say, that's right. You know, post-Civil War, memorialization in general was huge. So I'm sure that kind of prompted the family to pursue this memorialization of Rebecca Nurse. On that monument, it reads, Rebecca Nurse, Yarmouth, England, 1621, Salem, Mass, 1692. O Christian martyr, who for truth could die, when all about thee owned the hideous lie, the world redeemed from superstition's sway is breathing freer for thy sake today. And that would be from the poem Christian Martyr by John Greenleaf Whittier.
It was a somber walk. But again, it's one of these things that's just add to our narrative and our story when we can include these people and the places that they were and the things that they saw.
Once again, we went in order, and it just came full circle. Started at the Parris Parsonage, where it all began, went to the site of what was then the meeting house, and then ended the day paying tribute to these individuals who died. It was a successful trip to Danvers, to say the least.
Yeah. We do have one cool thing. Do you want to open it? Do you want me to open it?
I want to open it.
You want to open it?
Okay. So we have one more little special piece of the episode for you. Kind of like, those unboxing videos.
It's an unopening? No, wait.
An opening.
Unopening, not unopening.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Of.
Okay, I'm going to read it. To the descendants of Rebecca Nurse of Salem Village, Massachusetts, Danvers today. Born in 1621 in Great Yarmouth, England, executed July 19th, 1692, 71 years old. So this is one of the descendant packages from, you can get them at the Witch Museum. And so we've got Rebecca Nurses here, and Sarah's going to get to open it.
Yes, I am. So if you go into the Witch Museum, you don't have to go through the museum.
You can go in the gift shop.
Yep, go right into the gift shop. They have a wall of these, and not just for the executed, but I think they've expanded out to some accusers and some folks that have died in jail as well. So I'm opening it now.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so it is. I really wanted us to each peel out piece by piece, but it looks like it is all folded up together. So we will take it out. Okay.
Okay, what do we got?
All right. Ooh.
I want to see.
Sorry.
I want to see.
Ooh, may I read?
Oh.
Yeah, it's a full.
Let's look at that.
Yes. Dear descendant, sorry, we are not, full disclosure, we are not descendants that I know of. Although John Alden, an accused witch, is in my family tree by marriage. Okay. So, haha. But
sorry.
I
only got here. My father, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't even born in this country. So
yeah,
I'm not going to get that at all.
No witches in your family.
No.
Dear descendant, each year, our museum is visited by hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who can trace their lineage to the Salem Witch Trials of 1692. We meet people from all over the country and the world, people who have known of their lineage their entire lives, and individuals who have just found this connection and want to learn more. While we have always hoped to be able to connect with descendants and hear each specific story, we have been unable to take on a project of this size until now. Go ahead and read the second paragraph.
There's some stuff here.
Don't look.
Okay, I'm sorry. In this packet, you will find information relating to your relative. Each packet contains different levels of information, as we know very little about some individuals and much more about others. Where possible, we include specifics relating to age, birthplace, and family, including siblings and children. However, for many 17th century individuals, this information is impossible to know with certainty. The primary goal of this project is to provide basic biographical material, resources for further learning, and to help point you in the direction of additional genealogy information. Some families of witch trial descendants already have websites, blogs, reunions, and newsletters. When possible, we include this in the information. Reunions wasn't the Kristen, the woman at Essex Heritage, was telling us about how
Catherine.
Wasn't Catherine telling us about how they had meetings? There was a whole reunion.
Yes.
The nurse family.
Yeah. There's actually a group. I did a very brief bit of research on this. There's a group of individuals, I think it's about 400 to 500 people, that are local to this area and are all, for the most part, can trace their lineage back to Rebecca, or you don't have to be one to join. So some people are just huge history buffs, and this is kind of cute, they all call each other cousins. Yeah. But they get together, they have their reunions, and then you can say, oh, what line do you come from? Yeah. Oh, what line do you come from? It's kind of cool.
That's pretty neat. Okay. You want to read the next paragraph?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Wait, which part did you read?
Only the second paragraph.
Okay. We hope this project will continue growing and evolving in perpetuity. In perpetuity. In order to continue adding to this information, we need your help. While it may sound counterintuitive, it is important to remember that history is always changing as we continue to learn more information and make new discoveries. History is a living and breathing entity, and like all historical projects, these packets will most likely change over time. Family genealogists and descendants are often the best experts on a specific individual's history, so we want to hear from you. If you have additional information you believe should be included in these packets, or you find something you believe to be incorrect, please email our Director of Education at rachelc@salemwitchmuseum.com.
She's done like YouTube blogs and stuff for this year. We got to interview her.
Yeah, I think we need to get in there.
Right?
Maybe, do you think they'll let us record in there?
Oh, in like their archive area? Don't they have,
I think they've got some secret spaces.
I think they have a copy of The Wonders of the Invisible World.
Oh, that would be so cool.
I think something. They picked up a really important piece of historical evidence a few years back. What do we got?
Within each packet, you will find
dun, dun, dun.
1. A short biography. 2. List of locations related to each individual. 3. List of related reading for further research. 4. List of surviving court documents. 5. Additional descendant information when available. 6. Genealogical research resource list, and descendants questionnaire.
Oh, very neat. Okay, so let's see.
You got one more.
Okay. Within the scope of this project, we hope to both collect stories and probe deeper in what it means on a personal level to be a descendant. If you are interested in contributing a family story or would like to be added to a database of descendants, please fill out the included questionnaire and return it by email or mail. In addition, we invite you to join our Facebook group entitled Salem Witch Trial Descendants. Oh, that's neat. This group is hosted through our Facebook page and provides another resource for descendants. Sincerely, Rachel Christ, Director of Education, and Jill Christensen, Assistant Director of Education. So that's pretty neat. So we're going to thumb through this real quick, but as this is a paid thing, so you do have to buy it. I don't think we should totally go into depth on it.
Yeah, no. But in maybe just give them our reactions. And speaking of it being paid, like these are $10 a piece. You can pick them up, as we said, in the gift shop at the Salem Witch Museum. We are not being paid to do this in any way. Like this is just something that Jeff and I had on our to-do list to go through one of these descendant packets. So this is the first time that either him or I have seen one of these things, open these up. So what do we got there? What do you, your face is pretty.
You're going to love the shit out of this.
Oh, very nice. Let me see.
Oh my God. Okay. I mean, check out the bottom. What do we got at the bottom? One of your favorite things? All the way at the bottom, in the footnotes.
Footnotes?
The citations.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
You're pointing out.
It's all cited. It's not
yes,
just like...
this is how actual research is supposed to be conducted here. Footnotes and all. Yes, I like to see footnotes.
Okay. Oh, and talk about her sisters. Oh, okay. This is interesting. I think we talked real quick. The reparations, you said 20, I said 25.
Yeah.
Right here. In addition to reparations committee, allot the sum of 20 for Mary Eastie to her husband and 25 for Rebecca Nurse to her son Samuel.
Oh, look at that.
So
look at that.
Right? Questions already answered.
We got any more?
I mean, it's back and forth. So related locations, the homestead, up in Treadwell Walking Path, Pine Grove Cemetery, Clay's house, which is, I don't know what that is.
This is so cool.
Proctor's Ledge Memorial, Witch Trials Memorial, Victims Memorial, that's where we went. Related, oh my good Lord.
It just keeps going. Hold on, can I have some of these?
Sorry, I was just giving it to you.
Okay. You're getting, I get it all secondhand here.
The books referenced, we have Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World, Daniel Gagnon's book, Marilyn Roach, Upham.
Genealogical and Descendant Society's resource sheet. So this has a bunch of information about the Associated Daughters of Early American Witches. Did you know that was a thing?
I didn't know that's a thing.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing.
There's always a thing.
No, my question is, they're not witches.
Okay, well...
I'm going to be that person.
You're fine.
But it says membership requirements, a woman must be at least a woman. So it's only women, which why is it being...
What about the descendants of George Burroughs?
Right? A woman must be at least 16 years of age and able to prove direct lineal descent from an ancestor who was officially, by authority, government, or church, accused or tried or convicted and executed for the practices of witchcraft or wizardry in colonial America prior to the 31st of December, 1699. That's just, I don't know. I have a few
feels about that?
Quips about that, yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Sorry, I just took them all.
That's why I gave them to you in order. Okay, that goes there.
I don't do anything in order.
So this is some of the resources we were just citing. The examination as told by Deodette Lawson. I bet they have Parris's too.
Do we have a physical scan, like a copy of the document? I was really hoping to see that.
We do not. It's just a translation.
Do you have transcription of it?
Yeah. So excerpt from examination of Rebecca Nurse as told by Deodette Lawson. So that's what we were reading from. We were reading from the scanned copy on the Virginia database.
Right.
And so this is just a transcription of that.
Okay. I was hoping, this is high hopes. I was hoping that we would get like a scan of that original document, but that would also be a lot of work. So and it's not like they could read it, the longhand cursive and whatnot.
Oh, I hate trying to read that.
But it's so, you know what I learned recently? People study people study handwriting, of course, but if you look at the court documents, notice the weight at which they hold the pen. Look at the urgency in which they are writing, and you can ascertain so much more about what was happening in that moment if you focus on the way that it was written, not just the language itself.
Okay.
Which, of course, we don't get from typing.
Right.
Because,
Okay, so we're gonna like read through this, like the whole thing. This is great as just a learning tool, and you know, it's cool that like as a descendant you get to pick all this up. But I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend that if you are at all interested in the Salem Witch Trials, if you're a tour guide in the city, if you are at all, this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool.
Is that it?
I think that's it. I mean, we went through it and some highlights from it, so that's pretty neat. I'm gonna go get my own copy and make notes. And
yeah, so remember, you can pick up the Rebecca Nurse packet along with a ton of other ones, 24 at least, over at the Salem Witch Museum.
So I mean, I don't want to go through it on the air, like I said, because there's been a lot of research that's clearly gone into that, and the Witch Museum deserves to be credited and paid for their work. But I think we should do this for all of them.
Well, yeah, that was the plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good plan.
It's a good plan.
I like that plan.
Maybe we'll go pick out a random one day. Do a little mini episode. I don't know.
You know what? Like someone who we don't talk about much, like someone who's not as prominent.
Yeah. I would like that.
Yeah. Good deal. We got plans. We got things. Let's do it.
So I think that's going to wrap up our little field trip to Danvers.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this brief overview of some of the old Salem Village locations. If you are in the area, just remember to be respectful to all these locations. As you're driving through Danvers, it looks like your everyday metropolitan area.
Yeah,
we've got a couple malls.
We left in just a quick 2 miles.
Not even. It was no joke, in like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We were on the main drag, driving next to a mall.
Right,
driving
the
next
Tree Mall.
Driving next to the expressway. So it is tucked away. It's off the beaten path. It is something that you have to seek out, but we strongly suggest that you do so because it does tie you directly to where some of this stuff really kicked off.
Yeah. So like if anyone's coming to Salem and you're like, oh, I want to see the thing or do the like what's off the beaten path question, rent a car, call an Uber. It's all pretty walkable. And head over to Danvers.
A great way to escape the crowds, too.
Which, of course, used to be Salem Village. Until next time, thanks for listening.
See you later. You 1 star.
Yeah.
I feel better.
Take it. You can see yourself out.